Story time. Today is story time.
Don't we do that at nighttime?
Yeah, and in the morning. Good morning.
Got it. Good morning.
Today we're going to tell a couple stories.
You go first.
Okay, we have two really cool stories. And one of them is about a first-time home buyer couple getting married. And the other one is about a professional investor.
Cost of waiting. Shoot.
Cost of waiting is a real thing. We've referenced it in other podcasts, and we have really never dove into what does that really mean. And we have a real example. There is a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and they get engaged. And then they decide that they're going to buy a house. They did one thing exactly correct. They started with the money.
Yes, they did.
And they got pre-approved. And then with a pre-approval letter in hand, I was involved, and this is a true story. The year that we started looking at homes was somewhere around COVID.
Yeah, 2019, 2020. Yeah.
The homes that they were looking at, they'd find one or two that they liked, and we would write an offer, and then they would get outbid. They didn't get the house. And we did that a couple of times. And the one thing that this couple really struggled with was making more aggressive offers. And it was in a time frame where it seemed crazy. We hadn't heard of this offering above asking price and waiving a home inspection and taking additional risks that as a first-time home buyer, they were really nervous about.
That wasn't always the case, though. That's not how it started exactly. It was kind of the bridge between, I'll say, the old way of doing things and then this COVID-infused way of doing things. That bridge of deciding what they were going to offer and how to offer, it was and for all of us, it was just a very real thing that was dynamic and in real time.
And so in this new way, you had to basically win a house. And that's how we were coaching a lot of our buyers. It's no longer make an offer, counter, I give, you give, we meet somewhere in the middle. That just didn't work anymore. You had to go into auction style mentality and make an offer that a seller couldn't refuse. And it had to be aggressive. If you wanted that house, you had to run after it really hard.
The other disconnect was the price that you could pay for a home was much higher because the terms of the loans, if you were financing them, were much lower. And the resulting effect payment allowed you to afford a higher price point, which again, the bridge, dynamic, real time understanding of that and how to increase price points just had not yet sunk in. Everybody was still, for their mindset, focused on price.
Talk about that for a second, because if a buyer needed to go $10,000 or $20,000 in this market, now there were other markets where they were $50,000, $80,000 over asking price. But I'm talking about, to clarify things, I'm talking about a price range that was about $175,000 to $215,000 is where their sweet spot was for wanting to purchase. They liked that price point because of the home that it would afford them, and they liked the payment that was associated with that window of price. But at the time when they started, $175,000, you make an offer, don't get it, make an offer, don't get it. 6 months goes by, 7 months go by, and now the $175,000 house is $190,000. And it's the same house. And they were living through this, but wait a minute, it was $175,000 6 months ago, and they didn't want to pay $180,000 6 months ago, and now it's $190,000. And it was a really hard thing to grasp with this rising price range of homes. They went into this situation anticipating that they'd own a home within 6 months, and that didn't happen because they kept getting frustrated. They were unwilling to go $10,000, $20,000 over asking price. But in that market, a lot of buyers were willing because of the payment. So what was the math around that time?
Depending on the financing, depending on the credit scores, but $45 per every 10 grand, $4.5 per thousand, upwards of $50 to $60 per every 10 grand. So ultimately, and that's a 30-year payment. How much does $10,000 cost me in my mortgage payment per every 10 grand? And does that include principal, interest, and a mortgage insurance premium? Ergo, the spreads between those price points as in terms of monthly payment per 10 grand.
So $40 to $50 a month increase in payment to pay $10,000 more for the house. Yeah. And that's how a lot of buyers were, they really saw that, and they were going $10,000, $20,000 over because it was costing them, $40 to $80, $40 to $100 a month in a payment. And that was insignificant for the majority of people.
The but that I was just about to throw in is these homes were also appraising, most of them.
Yes.
So even though they might have been listed at 190, because they were going under contract so quick, that impacts the appraiser's opinion of value. Because if a house goes on market day one and off market day one under contract, there's a lot of demand for that, and the price points reflect it. So they were also appraising in most cases, which means you can finance those numbers above asking.
Back to the couple.
How many years went by?
Well, they gave up for a little while and they got an apartment. And they said, we're just going to rent for a little while.
What was the rationale?
The prices will come down. We're going to wait for the craziness to stop. And when things level out again and get normal, they'll get back in the game. But for now, they're just going to rent because they didn't think that paying $190 for a $175 house was worth it. They felt like they were getting duped and that they were overpaying. I'm not going to overpay for a house. So they waited.
Well, rent, $1,000 a month, $800 a month. You're talking about
$700 to $800 a month in rent for a 1-year lease is
$8,400 to $9,600.
Thanks, Rain Man. Math Man, I was going to say, Rain Man. And then over the next 12 months, the prices of homes continued to
increase. Yes.
And the interest rate continued to
increase.
So when they jumped back in the game some 12 to 18 months later, the 175 house is now 215 or more. And the interest rate went from a cushy 3.5% to 7.5%. And the buying power now for that same house,
astronomically higher. The amount of money they needed was much higher because down payments and affordability change over that time frame. And then not only that, they continued to rent for about 3 years. So you've got 10 grand a year for a 3-year period of time. That's a lot of money. And that's the initial cash to close scenario that could have been considered. So the cost of waiting, the moral of the story, is a real thing. And even in today's market, we just sat through Gary Keller's vision speech this past week for Keller Williams Family Reunion. Amount of homes that have transacted in the last 29 years is a 29-year low. It even predates the crash of 2008. And so when you're thinking about waiting to buy a home, it seemed as though maybe it would become more affordable and what's going to happen with the number of transactions that are actually selling in a given year. And they did a really good job of presenting history and present day, which is a good comparison. And what they suggested for 25 was that there would still be slightly more homes sold in 25 than in 24, albeit a 29-year low, and that homes would continue to appreciate, not depreciate, and that interest rates would remain relatively stable. The economy itself is just this huge dynamic thing. And housing drives the economy, So when a transaction happens and money moves, someone else is either moving into an apartment or upsizing and moving into another house. And then that means furniture and Home Depot visits and Walmart runs for cleaning supplies, all these things that go into the consumer spending money. And so housing is a really big part of that. The interesting part that I took away was house prices are continuing to go up. It almost looks like we've bottomed out in the number of transactions per year. They're expecting, I think, 4.1 million and 25-ish, close to 4.2.
And that's a historic low in the number of homes compared to 30 years ago. At
the end of the day, though, the number of people that have an interest rate, below 5% is about half the market. I think that number is 50%-ish.
I think it was actually higher.
It may have been, but I think below 5% was 50% of the market. And then I think 75% has an interest rate below 7%. And ultimately what continues to happen is the interest rates that individuals have on their loans is changing because the number of homes that are transacting is increasing. And so the lock-in effect is becoming a thing of the past. Slowly but surely, every year, the number of people that have interest rates above 4% is going to change dramatically.
Going to increase because they have to move, and when they get the new loan it's a higher rate, and it's only a matter of time because the people that actually stay in their home for 30 or 40 years is so small, right? Is that what you're saying?
It is. It's exactly what I'm saying. And so the cost of waiting, generally speaking, and we even say this, when's the best time to buy a house?
5 years ago.
That's right. So if you go back 5 years and you look at what the prices were then, and you look at what the interest rates were then, and you look at the number of transactions that went through then, and you compare through the market anywhere in the country, most everything is still more expensive. Housing affordability is still a topic. Interest rates are elevated, and yet people are still moving, buying, listing, selling. It's a thing. So don't wait.
Correct. And first-time home buyer, boyfriend and girlfriend, got engaged, got married, bought a home, paid almost $100,000 more than where they initially started, had an increased interest rate. I don't know where they ended up, but it was probably somewhere between 6 and 7. They've been in their house for almost 2 years and love it. Don't regret anything about anything that they've done. They love their place. And it's a good thing they bought it 2 years ago, because today it's definitely more money than what they paid.
All of these stats, all of this input is something that we talk about regularly. We surround ourselves with these types of conversations consistently because as real estate professionals and professional investors, it's what we do. And sharing these stories is really important. And sharing a professional investing story is also really interesting because it's the other end of the spectrum. And was approached by this couple. They had been referred to me. How do you continue to just buy real estate? What are the ways that you continue to have access to capital to do the things that you want to do?
Because they were tapped out in the mortgage world. You can only have so many mortgages. You can only leverage so much money that you have saved. And it takes all this time to put money back. If you're collecting rents from rental properties, it just takes a long time for you to build that money back up, right?
That's one thing that they were concerned about. And that was some of the conversation in the marketplace that they had with others. And so a fireside chat with mutual friends turned into, you need to talk to Brandon, which basically was an access to capital. And an access to capital conversation turned into a building wealth map client. This couple had 9 homes and 17 doors at the time that we started this conversation. So 9 homes, 9 addresses, and 17 doors. Obviously, some of them are multifamily. And the ability to access that capital and how to do it, and are you doing individual loans or are you doing portfolio loans, blanket mortgages? You know, how are you going to move the money? And when you're talking about moving the money, that's the conversation that spawned the MAP clients.
And this couple in particular had been to the bank, a brick and mortar local bank, and had asked some questions about how to, and they were met with much resistance and or a whole bunch of, we don't do that, or no, you can't.
A lot of normalcy, a lot of individuals that themselves are just paying attention to their day in, day out. They have a job, right? They're not professional investors. And so they don't have access to capital and know how to think, see, and act differently, because you're actually talking to a person that that's just their job. That's not their career. That's not their
You
profession.
mean at the bank?
That's right.
Suit and tie behind the desk. It's their job.
That's right.
They are not trained in investing. They are not necessarily trained in real estate. Do people know? I don't think they do, that a lot of lenders behind the brick and mortar bank with the tie at the desk job had very little mortgage training. The majority of them, they train you on the job. I could apply for that job. I don't know what the training requirements would be, if it's a 6-week thing or what, but I could be a loan officer at a brick and mortar bank, right?
You could be, sure.
I get hired and train me. And
you also are limited to the products that institution offers. And so you immerse yourself in those products, and those products become top of mind, and that's what you talk about. And at the end of the day, that's right. The resulting effect is your scope is limited by whatever that institution says that you can do, coupled with the person's experience that's actually giving the advice on the products that you can use, which itself is probably flawed.
We said this some time ago, and it as we're growing and doing more unique things and have better opportunities, I think I said something like, how do these people do it in California, in Texas, in New York? I see them on the internet. I hear some of the stories. I see the pitches for the big seminars about how to be an investor. And you look at, they bought 100 units last year, or they're purchasing just insane numbers. And I said, like, why are we different? Why can't we? I don't feel like here, Northeast Ohio, in my little pocket of life, that we can do these things. Why is it different? How do they do it in California? How do they do it in New York? How are they getting the money? And it seems there's like this mindset here that is small thinking, that it's not available and or they can't do it. It's literally a limiting belief that I said it's out there and you said it's out there. And that's also part of this spawn of our growth, and this path that we've chosen to not just do it ourselves, but help other people do it. And it's a mindset thing here too.
It's not just here. You don't know what you don't know. And we work with professionals in many different types of businesses. Conversations come up regularly about real estate and how it's intertwined with their business. And the deciding effect that I always convey, the differentiator, is if you're a small business and you have the ability to purchase a building, your business immediately becomes more valuable. And the reason it becomes more valuable is real estate is more valuable. It adds to the bottom line. There's tax planning initiatives that you can take that you cannot do if you rent. And that doesn't matter whether it's a business or whether it's a residential. So back to this couple, the conversations that we had, we built their map. So we did estate planning, financial planning, mortgage and real estate planning, coupled with tax planning. Corbett Consulting plays in that hub, and we set this map up with individuals that some of them were already servicing them as some of those quadrants: estate planning, tax planning, financial planning. They had a CPA, weren't really satisfied with some of the advice that the CPA was giving. And so we asked pointed questions, and we ultimately decided that moving CPA firms was the right thing to do. They did not have a financial planner, and financial planning is a big component, especially when you're going to consider security-based lending. And all of those things turned into what I call a MAP client. And so the MAP client is now just in 24, after not quite 2 years, it'll be 2 years next month. We have gone just in 24. So we're not going to talk about what we did in 23. Just in 24, we purchased 9 addresses. And when we onboarded them, they had 9 addresses. So in 24 alone, in 9 of 12 months, they bought a house. And then in January of 25, they bought the 10th. So they bought 10 addresses, 10 pieces of real estate in 13 months.
And he was getting no's, you can't, from lots of other people. And it sounds easy in hindsight, and it was a huge pain in the butt for them. There's paperwork involved, there were appraisals involved, there's negotiations involved. It was not an easy thing, but there was a path to complete it where he was getting a hard stop with, you can't, nope, no, can't do it.
Well, we spent the first 12 to 15 months building the foundation of our planners. Our meetings were centered around tax planning and control, which is the most important piece when you talk about the 3 silos for building wealth. And I wish I would have known this much younger in life. And I guess you could always start the sentence with, I wish I would have, and then ... what comes after. So it's not just financial, be it emotional or anything associated with what you learn as you age. There's really 3 pillars, 3 silos that we consult in. And the first is tax planning and control. The second is leverage. And what are you leveraging? Is it knowledge? Is it experience? Is it technology? What's the leverage that you're using in that silo and why? And the third is cash flowing assets. So tax planning and control, leverage, cash flowing assets. When you blend those together, that recipe is how you build wealth.
Have you met anyone through Corbett Consulting, client or not client, that has come to you and had all 4 quadrants set up? Has anybody already had that?
One, and we had him on as Danny Duvall, the gambling man, and he didn't even know how all of those were sauced together, and he still has some questions, and we've been throwing some ideas around, but that's the only one.
Buying, selling, or investing? We are the Creative Ones. Visit us at creativeones.com. And how many people have 3 quadrants? 4, 2, how many?
Very few people have 4. It's almost like a unicorn. 3, you see it every now and again. 2 is more normal. Very rarely do you see people have none.
In your world with like they're already active investors, so they probably have 1.
1 or 2. Yeah. Most people have either a tax planner or a financial planner. And in that regard, there's a lot of foundational work that goes into building the map. No different than, I use analogies to help it make sense. You know, you decide that you want to go on a trip in spring. Is it going to be a cold trip? Is it going to be a warm trip? Is it going to be in the country? Is it going to be out of the country? What's your itinerary? How are you getting there? Where are you stopping along the way? And all of the things that go into doing and building that itinerary is no different than the financial map, the building wealth map that we create at Corbett Consulting.
That's such a great analogy. Like, what if you wanted to go to Mexico and you didn't realize you needed a passport until you were at the airport?
When you are working with individuals about those details, it's important for that to be conveyed in a manner of, those are complex topics, and then how do you dumb it down? An example of topics that could be something we would talk about super specific today would be partnerships and K1s. And if you're an individual LLC, you've got a Schedule E, if you own real estate, reporting to your personal return.
They say I do. I just trust that it's there.
So we just
Taxes are really not my thing.
Yeah.
They have to be my thing. I mean, I have someone help me do them, but it's really not my jam.
No, it's also comprehension and understanding the questions to ask next, which is where we come in when we sit along with clients and we start talking with them and their advisors about what to do and how to do it, which we just did on Friday. There was a client that came in from Skaneateles, New York, and I didn't even know how to pronounce that town until this past year. Skaneateles, New York. It's a doctorate of physical therapy. Wife's a pharmacist, and they are scaling their real estate.
More stories.
Situation, rather robust. Some conversations came up with the CPA about individual LLCs and Form Schedule E, and partnership LLCs and Form 8825. And so how all that comes together is really planning.
Okay, so I want to do something and leverage a partnership. And a lot of people really are terrified of partnerships because you just really hear a lot about the bad stories. I have another story. I have 3 more stories within that conversation while you were talking of people and examples of why they don't want to do a partnership, right? Someone that doesn't hold up the end of the bargain, something happens. What do we say? Everything's fine until it's not.
Everything's fine until it's not.
So if you wanted to go into a partnership with someone, what would be one of the first things you should do?
The very first thing you need to do is you need to get an EIN number and register it with the IRS so you can open a bank account. The next thing you need to do is get your articles of organization registered with the state that you want to operate in. And then what's oftentimes left out, it's just one of those things that you need to follow through with. And the very third thing is an operating agreement.
I think you lose sight of that because once you do the first 2 things, like you're in business now.
Yeah, you want to go.
Yeah. And then you forget about the part of, it's essentially like the equivalent of a prenup in a marriage. It's what happens when we want to break up, right?
Or what happens if you want to bring on another partner.
Or someone dies.
Yep. These are things that we get into the weeds and we mentor folks on how to do that. And the conversation on Friday was about, should I bring in additional partners? It's an open-ended question, and we're going to have some follow-up video chats about that. One of the things that I've consistently conveyed to people over the years, you don't have to start a partnership with everything being 50-50.
I know. Why does my brain think that? I think the same thing. Oh, we're partners and it's equal partners.
Yeah.
It's like something like good, maybe it's a good faith human thing that like, oh, we're going to be fair. If we're partners, it's 50-50.
It's automatically coming to mind for people because if there's two, you think half, right? If there's four, you think quarters. And it doesn't always work out that way because you may have someone that has the money that needs a doer. What's the doer going to bring? Are they going to bring all of the knowledge and know-how, and the money person's just going to sit there and provide the money? And so you have to have the dialogue about, that weight of seesaw in the partnership. And I would say those are not 50-50 partners.
Mm-hmm.
As a partnership, when your return is done, if you have a partnership return, you're going to file a Form 8825 if it's real estate. And then that's going to produce a K1. Is it a positive number and you've earned income, or is it a negative number and you've lost income? And then the ratio of whether that's positive or negative is split based on the percentile rank of the partnership.
Okay, so you have a property and you have a profit of $10,000 on your K1, and you have a partnership and you are 60% and the other partner is 40%, and there's $10,000. And so then your K1 would be...
If you're the 60% partner, you would get $6,000 from the 10, and the 40% partner would get $4,000.
And that's what you're claiming if it's income on your taxes as income, right? And then however that affects your tax situation, or a loss. Are there some investors out there that really want the loss?
They not only want the loss, some investors actually just buy real estate and do nothing with it. So there's a consistent drag on revenue that they're making elsewhere. And, there's a lot of blight around, and certainly in big cities and smaller Midwest communities, you look at, why is this building like that? It's been like that since I've been a little kid, someone may say.
Yeah.
And it's typically a professional investor that's just wanting to own the property and depreciate it and have expenses that they can write off against other profits.
And they, don't really have any interest in maintaining it or fixing it up, or they just really want that loss times however many.
Yeah, a lot of them are vacant. If you look at the first two lines on your Schedule E or your 8825, I think it's lines 3 and 4. It's royalties and rents. That's it for revenue, just those two lines. And then everything else is built around, how much are the property taxes? What's the maintenance? What's the homeowner's insurance? What's the depreciation? What's the amortization? All of these things go into developing your cash position, that go into developing your income position. And it's around tax planning and control. And got to reemphasize that again. That's the most important thing that you can do, be it an individual or partners in business. Tax planning and control is how you build wealth.
Is that how the big boys do it?
That's how the big boys do it. A distinctive approach to passive income with luxury vacation rentals.
For more information, check out our website, twinvestors.com.
So the story. At dinner, and it's a couple, and we're just chatting, and Gutsy Moves came up.
It sure did. It's come up a few times. I'm so happy about that.
And she said, I didn't understand this acronym. And then he goes, he's only said it how many times?
They talk about it all the time. You're not listening. And she's like, well, I don't write. Oh, okay, I remember what that was. I don't even know what the acronym was. It's probably like STR or something like that.
So I'm reminded, and I can hear Joel Block in the back of my mind right now telling me to limit my usage of acronyms when I write. And it's for that reason. And so it makes sense to me, but it may not make sense to others. And clarity in communication is vital, and how you communicate is vital. Tonality, all of those things around communicating.
I've learned that in real estate because we have a lot of lingo that people don't quite understand. And you talk to talk to people differently. I might talk to a real estate agent and drop, like I did a CMA on a house, and I found this like 3 comps in the MLS, and they know exactly what I mean. And meanwhile, if I say that to a seller, they're like, CMA, MLS, what is that? So you have to dumb it down. We just said this. Talk to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Explain it to me, because it can come off as you're arrogant to some extent with this thing. But
Very true.
Yeah, it's no different than maybe a doctor, and they say they have lingo, nurses,
Certain
And-
doctors have better bedside manners than others,
Yeah,
only
we try-
because their communication.
Yeah, we try really hard. So this couple is kind of spatting back and forth with like, you're not listening to them. And
It's funny. I mean, it was a cool conversation, and it reminded me, and then we got into our conversation of the letter game that you play as kids when you're driving down the road, and a lot of trips back and forth between North Carolina, Virginia, and then Pennsylvania. So it's just a lot of ways to remember these routes as you're going along them. And if you play the letter game or the license plate game or whatever it is that you kind of play, you just come up upon these spots and okay, in the back of your head, I got this place here. So for me, translating the word antiques just I didn't understand it.
what's an anti-Q?
Exactly. Through
But you
conversation.
knew you needed a Q.
I knew I needed a Q. So an antique ended up being antiques. And Mom and my sister were very much loving the antique stores. So we would stop. But I never put two and two together that an antique was an antique. I just knew I could get a Q out of that word. So it's just dumbing it down to the point where it's translated appropriately. And we were using that analogous to our conversations on Gutsy Moves.
We did, yeah.
What was your word?
Mine was pahone.
Pahone.
Yes, driving down the street. Now, this is also going to tell my age because there were phone booths on streets, and we would drive around, and one day in the car, it asked my dad, what's a pahone?
That's great.
He about lost it. So it was pahone for a long time in our family.
Learning, educating, translating conversations and how we communicate with others is vitally important to continuing our mentorships and our teachings of people that communicate with us about how to build wealth with real estate.
Sure. So this couple actually talking about Gutsy Moves referenced a specific episode that was called The
Gambling Man.
The Gambling Man, yeah. So she actually resonated. This couple had a takeaway because they felt some commonality with Danny from being involved in real estate, being a similar age, and actually felt a little behind the eight ball, so to speak, in comparing themselves to what he had accomplished in real estate versus what they'd like to accomplish. And I actually think she said, it's go time.
She did, and it was a really cool conversation to watch it all come together. And the interesting part about that was that conversation enclosed and encompassed a conversation that we were having about another vendor, business relationship, friend that himself has listened to Gutsy Moves, he's on the verge of making the leap to starting his own business and leaving something behind. And that conversation was about the name of the business. So we were looking up Secretary of State and the names of businesses, and it was a really cool conversation about how the two of them then, the two guys knowing each other really well, can work together, accentuating the things that they do well to make their move.
Yeah. And then maybe we've inspired someone through sharing another real life story that's hyper local. It makes you feel confident that if they can do it, I can do it. And that is I think that's the best thing that we've done so far, is realized that these inspiring stories for the people that are listening are actually giving them a swift kick in the old ass.
And that is cool. Industry-wide relationships, inspiring folks to see the real estate world differently. It's what we do. It's pretty fun.